Hey guys, it's Karenology. This one is pure chaos. You have to hear how it all went down.
It all started with a letter. A harmless-looking envelope with the Homeowner Association's logo landed in my mailbox one quiet Saturday morning. My wife Emily was setting up breakfast for the kids, and I was about to pour myself a second cup of coffee when I noticed it. Something about it felt off, like the prelude to an unpleasant surprise. "What's that?" Emily asked, glancing at the envelope in my hand. Her tone was casual, but I could sense the unease beneath it. Ever since we moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, our interactions with the homeowner association had been less than pleasant. "Probably another notice about landscaping," I muttered, tearing it open. As I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanned the text, and my stomach tightened with every line. They weren't complaining about the length of my grass or the color of my mailbox this time. No, this was something else entirely. The letter informed me that the association had installed motion sensors around my property. Not asked, not suggested. Installed without my permission. They did what? Emily's voice rose, her brow furrowing as she grabbed the letter from me. "How can they just do that? Isn't this illegal?" I didn't have an answer. My hands clenched into fists as I looked out the window, scanning the edges of our yard. And there they were. Small, almost unnoticeable black devices mounted on poles near the perimeter of my property. They blended in just enough to avoid casual detection, but were obvious once you knew to look. "This can't be real," I said, my voice thick with disbelief. "They can't just invade our privacy like this." The rest of the day was a blur of anger and confusion. I tried calling the homeowner association's office, but their automated system informed me they'd be closed until Monday. Typical. By evening, my frustration had turned into a simmering resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. On Monday morning, I arrived at the homeowner association's office, determined to get answers. The receptionist greeted me with a forced smile that vanished the moment I explained why I was there. "Oh, you'll need to speak with Karen about that," she said, pointing me toward a door labeled Community Director. Karen. The name alone made my blood boil. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, always meddling, always finding new ways to make life difficult for anyone who didn't bow to her authority. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door and stepped inside. Karen sat behind her desk, radiating smugness. Her blonde bob was perfectly styled, and she wore a power suit that screamed, "I'm in charge." She didn't bother hiding her irritation as she gestured for me to sit. "Mark, isn't it?" she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "What can I do for you?" "You can explain why there are motion sensors on my property," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "I never approved this." Karen's smile didn't falter. "It's all in the community's best interest. Security has been a growing concern, and the board voted to install the sensors to ensure everyone's safety. Without asking me? Without my consent?" My voice was rising, but I didn't care. "This is my property. You can't just install surveillance equipment on it." "Actually," Karen said, leaning back in her chair, "if you review the bylaws, you'll see that the homeowner association has the authority to implement measures that benefit the community as a whole. It's perfectly legal." "Legal?" I snapped. "Do you even hear yourself? You're invading my family's privacy and hiding behind technicalities." Karen's expression hardened. "I understand your concerns, Mark, but the decision has been made. If you have an issue, you're welcome to file a formal complaint." I left her office fuming, but I wasn't about to let her have the last word. That evening, I started digging into the bylaws she mentioned. Hours turned into days as I pored over legal jargon, looking for anything that could prove her wrong. Meanwhile, the motion sensors loomed in the background, a constant reminder of the battle I was gearing up to fight. Then things escalated. One morning, I woke up to find a letter taped to my front door. It was another notice from the homeowner association, accusing me of deliberately obstructing community security efforts and threatening fines if I tampered with the sensors. To make matters worse, Karen had rallied a few neighbors to her side. I overheard them gossiping outside my house, throwing around words like irresponsible and dangerous. Emily tried to stay calm for the kids' sake, but I could see the stress eating away at her. "We can't live like this," she said one night as we sat on the couch. "You need to do something, Mark." And I would, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Karen wasn't just some busybody. She had the backing of the homeowner association and enough influence to turn the neighborhood against us. If I wanted to win, I'd have to be smart, strategic. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer specializing in property rights. As I explained the situation, he listened intently, nodding as I described the motion sensors and the homeowner association's overreach. You might have a case, he said finally, but you'll need evidence. Photos, documents, anything that proves they're violating your rights. That evening, armed with a camera, I went outside to document the sensors. I was halfway through when a flashlight beam swept across my yard. "What do you think you're doing, Mus?" a voice demanded. I turned to see Karen standing there, flanked by two other members of the homeowner association. Her expression was a mix of anger and triumph, as if she'd caught me committing some heinous crime. "Gathering evidence," I shot back. "For when I take this to court." Karen stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "You're making a mistake, Mark. The homeowner association has resources, connections. You don't want to go down this road." But I did, and I wasn't about to back down. Karen's words echoed in my head long after the confrontation. The homeowner association has resources, connections. It felt like more than just a warning. It was a threat, veiled in the authority she wielded over the neighborhood. But if she thought I would cower, she was wrong. The next morning, I called my lawyer again to update him. "Karen's making this personal," I said. "She caught me documenting the sensors last night and basically threatened me." "That's good," he replied, surprisingly calm. "If they're acting aggressively, it strengthens your case. Did you get pictures of the sensors?" "Yes," I said, "but I'm worried they'll try to tamper with the evidence." "Photograph everything," he advised. "Every letter, every notice. Keep records of every conversation, even if it's just your notes. The more you document, the better prepared we'll be." Emily, overhearing the conversation, nodded her agreement. She'd been quietly supportive through all this, but I could see the worry etched on her face. Our kids deserved to grow up in a safe and peaceful home, and this neighborhood had seemed perfect when we moved in. Now it felt like a trap. Later that week, things escalated further. I came home from work to find a construction crew in my backyard. The noise of machinery and the sight of strangers trampling over my lawn made my blood boil. I rushed outside, demanding answers. "What are you doing on my property?" I shouted. One of the workers, a burly man in a neon vest, shrugged. "We're here on orders from the homeowner association. Said they needed access to install additional security measures." "You don't have permission to be here," I yelled. "Get off my property now." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. But before he could respond, Karen appeared. Of course, she was there, overseeing the chaos. "Mark," she said with a saccharine smile, "you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. The association has every right to ensure the safety of our community. By trespassing, by destroying my yard," I shot back, pointing at the mess they'd made. "This is harassment, Karen, and I won't stand for it." She crossed her arms, her smile fading. "You're obstructing progress. If you have an issue, file a complaint. But I'll remind you that the board unanimously approved this project." "That doesn't give you the right to violate my property," I snapped. The crew, sensing the tension, began to pack up their equipment. Karen's glare could have burned a hole through me, but I stood my ground until the last worker had left. That night, I documented everything. Photos of the damage, notes about the confrontation, and even a recording of Karen's dismissive remarks. My lawyer assured me we were building a solid case, but it didn't feel like enough. Every day brought a new battle, and I was growing tired. Then came the letters. They started small. Fines for alleged violations, notices about unapproved landscaping changes, and warnings about unfriendly behavior. It was clear Karen was using every tool at her disposal to make my life miserable. One letter even accused me of hosting an unauthorized gathering, a complete fabrication, as we hadn't had guests over in weeks. Emily was nearing her breaking point. "Maybe we should just pay the fines," she said one evening. "Maybe it'll make them back off." "That's exactly what they want," I replied. "If we give in now, they'll never stop. We have to fight this." The final straw came when I discovered one of the motion sensors had been installed just outside our bedroom window. It felt invasive, calculated, as if Karen wanted to remind me that she was always watching. The next day, I confronted her in front of the entire neighborhood. It was a sunny Saturday, and many of the residents were outside, tending to their lawns or walking their dogs. I waited until I saw Karen chatting with a group of neighbors, then marched over. "Karen, we need to talk," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. She turned, her smile as fake as ever. "Mark, if this is about the sensors, I've already explained—" "No," I interrupted. "This is about your abuse of power. You've been harassing my family, violating our privacy, and spreading lies. It stops now. The neighbor's chatter ceased as all eyes turned to us. Karen's cheeks flushed, but she quickly recovered. I'm simply doing my job, she said coolly. If you have an issue, take it up with the board. I will, I said, my voice steady. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what's been going on. This isn't about community safety. This is about control, and it's gone too far. Karen's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Mark. You don't want to make enemies here? Neither do you, I replied, turning to walk away. As I left, I could feel the weight of the neighbors' stares. Some looked sympathetic, others uncertain. But I knew one thing. Karen's reign of terror was starting to crack, and I wasn't about to stop until it shattered completely. The fallout from my public confrontation with Karen was swift and brutal. By the next morning, a new notice was taped to my front door. This one accused me of disrupting community harmony and levied a hefty fine for my behavior unbecoming of a resident. Emily found it first and brought it to me, her face pale with worry. Mark, this is getting out of hand, she said, handing me the notice. They're not going to stop. I crumpled the paper in my fist. Good, neither am I. The next step in my fight was to gather allies. I started talking to my neighbors, explaining what Karen and the homeowner association were doing to my family. To my surprise, I wasn't the only one who'd been targeted. Several residents shared stories of being fined for minor infractions or being pressured into compliance with unreasonable rules. A few were too scared to speak out, but others were angry and ready to take a stand. One of them was Lisa, a single mother who lived 2 houses down. She'd been fined multiple times for her kids' toys being left in the yard. Another was Mr. Jensen, an elderly man who'd been harassed over the color of his shutters. Together, we formed a small but determined group, and I began documenting their stories along with my own. Meanwhile, Karen ramped up her campaign against me. More letters arrived, each one more threatening than the last. The fines piled up, and she even filed a formal complaint accusing me of creating a hostile environment. It was clear she wanted to isolate me, to make me feel like the entire community was against me. But her plan backfired. The more she pushed, the more my neighbors began to see her for what she was, a bully who thrived on power and control. Word spread quickly about our group, and more residents began coming forward. Some were hesitant at first, but once they saw that others were standing up, they joined in. The turning point came when I discovered something Karen hadn't anticipated. Late one night, as I was reviewing the bylaws and financial records of the homeowner association, I found discrepancies. Large sums of money were being allocated to community projects that didn't exist. Payments to contractors with no clear explanation. It was a smoking gun, and I knew I had to act fast. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer the next morning and showed him the documents. This proves they're misusing funds, I said, barely able to contain my excitement. He nodded, a grin spreading across his face. This could be the leverage we need. If we can prove financial misconduct, we can bring the board under scrutiny. Karen won't be able to hide behind her position anymore. With my lawyer's help, I prepared a formal complaint and filed it with the county's housing authority. The process was slow, but it was a step in the right direction. In the meantime, I continued rallying my neighbors, sharing updates, and encouraging them to stay strong. Karen's iron grip on the community was starting to loosen, and I could feel the tide turning. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. One afternoon, as I was working in my garage, I heard a loud crash from the backyard. Rushing outside, I found that someone had smashed one of the motion sensors. A note was taped to the broken device. This is your last warning. Emily found me pacing in the kitchen later that evening, the note clenched in my hand. Mark, we need to call the police, she said firmly. And tell them what? I asked. That the homeowner association is threatening us? They'll think we're crazy. This isn't just about the sensors anymore, she said. They're trying to intimidate us. We can't let them win. She was right. I called the local police department and filed a report. The officer who came to our house listened carefully and took photos of the note and the broken sensor. He promised to follow up, but his tone suggested he wasn't optimistic about finding the culprit. The incident only strengthened my resolve. At our next group meeting, I shared what had happened and urged everyone to stay vigilant. Karen's scared, aren't I said. She's losing control, and this is her way of trying to hold on. But we can't let her win. We're stronger together. The group agreed, and we decided to take our fight public. Using social media and local news outlets, we began sharing our stories. The attention was immediate. Reporters started calling, and one local station even ran a segment about the homeowner association revolt. Karen's pristine image as the dedicated community leader was starting to crumble. The pressure was mounting, and Karen's actions became more desperate. She called an emergency board meeting and tried to push through new rules that would give her even more power. But this time, the residents fought back. With our group's growing influence, we managed to rally enough people to attend the meeting and vote her proposals down. The final blow came when the county launched an official investigation into the homeowner association's finances. Karen's mismanagement and questionable expenditures were laid bare, and she was forced to step down as community director. The board dissolved shortly after, and a new one was elected, made up of residents who genuinely wanted to improve the neighborhood. As for me and my family, life finally returned to normal. The motion sensors were removed, the fines were dropped, and the air in the neighborhood felt lighter. I'd never asked to be a hero, but standing up to Karen and the homeowner association had taught me something important. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing your ground, no matter how hard the fight. The relief of Karen stepping down and the dissolution of the old homeowner association board was short-lived. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the scars of the battle remained, and there was still much work to do to rebuild the community. The new board, composed of fair-minded and progressive residents, reached out to me and others who had stood against Karen to help guide the neighborhood into a new era. But it wasn't just about healing the neighborhood. I had unfinished business. The financial investigation into the association had revealed shocking depths of corruption. Tens of thousands of dollars had been funneled into Karen's personal projects, including a community beautification fund that turned out to be used for landscaping her private property. The local news caught wind of it, and Karen's name became synonymous with scandal. Even as the community tried to move forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done. One morning, Emily called me over to the window. "Look," she said, pointing to a car idling at the end of our street. "That's the third time this week." It was an old, nondescript sedan, but the sight of it sent a chill down my spine. I stepped outside, phone in hand, ready to take a picture. As I approached, the car sped off, tires squealing. Emily was right. Karen might have been ousted, but she wasn't going to let go that easily. The harassment started subtly. Anonymous letters in the mail warning me to watch my back, trash dumped on my lawn in the middle of the night, and even a dead bird left on our porch. A chilling message if ever there was one. I filed a report with the police, but without evidence, there was little they could do. "She's trying to scare us back into silence," Emily said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and notes from the investigation. "But it's not going to work. Not this time." I nodded, but the weight of it all was exhausting. Fighting Karen had consumed our lives for months, and the thought of continuing the battle was almost too much to bear. Still, I knew Emily was right. We couldn't let fear win. With the support of the new board, we decided to hold a community meeting to address the lingering issues and set a path forward. The turnout was larger than I expected. Neighbors who had once been silent or complicit under Karen's rule now spoke up, sharing their own experiences and frustrations. It was cathartic, a collective release of years of pent-up resentment and fear. During the meeting, one of the new board members announced a plan to overhaul the association's policies. Transparency would be prioritized, with open financial records and regular audits. They also proposed a neighborhood watch program, run by residents instead of outside contractors, to ensure that everyone felt safe without invasive measures like motion sensors. The changes were met with overwhelming support, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was tested when Karen made her final move. Late one night, just as Emily and I were settling into bed, the sound of shattering glass jolted us awake. I rushed downstairs to find a rock lying in the middle of our living room floor, surrounded by shards of our front window. Attached to the rock was a note, "This isn't over." Emily called the police while I stood there, shaking with anger and fear. The officer who arrived took the note as evidence and promised to increase patrols in the area. "We'll do what we can," he said, but I could tell he wasn't optimistic about catching whoever was responsible. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind set my nerves on edge. By morning, I knew I couldn't wait for the police to act. I had to take matters into my own hands. With the help of some neighbors, I installed security cameras around my property, ensuring there wouldn't be a next time without evidence. I also reached out to the local news station that had covered Karen's downfall, sharing the latest developments. Within days, a new segment aired, detailing the continued harassment and calling on the community to stand together against intimidation. The response was overwhelming. Neighbors I barely knew stopped by to offer support. Some even volunteered to take turns patrolling the neighborhood at night. The sense of solidarity was humbling, and it became clear that Karen's tactics were backfiring. The more she tried to divide us, the stronger we became. The final resolution came not through confrontation, but through persistence. The ongoing investigation into Karen's financial misconduct led to criminal charges. She was arrested and faced trial for embezzlement and harassment. Watching the news footage of her being led out of her house in handcuffs was a bittersweet moment. Justice was being served, but the damage she'd done would take time to heal. In the months that followed, the neighborhood transformed. The new board's initiatives brought people closer together, fostering a sense of trust and community that had been missing for years. The motion sensors were long gone, replaced by flower beds and community gardens. The fines and threats were a thing of the past, and my family finally felt at peace. Looking back, the fight against Karen and the old homeowner association had been the hardest battle of my life. But it had also taught me the value of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Change is never easy, but sometimes it takes a single voice to inspire a chorus. And in the end, that chorus was louder than Karen ever could have imagined.